Some Apple fans have been smug for years about how their Macs were so much more secure than PCs. They wouldn't listen to any arguments about how it was just a matter of them being a smaller target because they had a smaller market share, and they weren't bothered by the criticisms that it was just because Apple was so selfish with their code. But our next guest admits that while he is a Mac fan, he didn't think it was fair that there weren't more exploits for it, so he decided to write some and some tools to detect them. Earlier today, he presented a session called Writing Badass Malware for OS X. Synack Director of Research, Patrick Wardle. Patrick, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk about some Mac malware.
Yeah, now tell me why, if you're such an Apple fan, did you decide to go after them and start writing some exploits?
Yeah, I've definitely drank the apple juice. But I was concerned that as I looked more and more into Mac security, how easy it was for me to write malware that could bypass Apple's security mitigations and persist on my computer. And obviously, if I can do that, others could do that as well. So I thought it was important for people to know that their Macs were at risk, and talking about it I thought would be a way to kind of spur conversation and maybe raise the threat so people would really understand and start taking it seriously.
That's very respectable of you.
I'm trying.
Tell us about the exploits that you've created.
Yeah, so I found a bunch of exploits and done some malware. I mostly focus on how attackers can get code onto Mac users. So one thing is there's this tool called Gatekeeper that is built into the operating system that tries to protect users from infecting themselves, running unsigned code, verifying software downloads. And I was able to find some ways that a malicious adversary could bypass that, even though it was carefully watching what was downloaded. I reported that to Apple. That's now fixed, but there's some other issues as well. And then I spent some time trying to figure out how we can make Mac malware better, because the existing Mac malware that's out there, in my opinion, is very amateur. And the problem with that is both Apple and third-party security vendors use the existing malware kind of as a litmus test to verify and validate their tools. I feel like they kind of give themselves a pat on their back where I don't think they should be.
Got it. Now, I mean, so Gatekeeper's kind of, I would think, part of the reason that Apple is usually so smug, right? If it prevents the execution of unsigned code. So the fact that you've been able to get around that is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely problematic. It's one of the cornerstones of their security posture. And the fact that I was able to bypass it in several ways was a little worrisome because, again, I'm sure there's smarter people out there, nation-states adversaries, who are probably finding the same bugs and using that to attack and exploit Mac users, which is really my concern as a Mac user myself.
Now, what has Apple been like to work with? What's their response been?
They've actually been great. Once I got contact with their security team, they've been very receptive, very interested in my work. I wouldn't say they love me, but they appreciate it. And so it's been great working with them. They've seemed to quickly patch some of the issues I found and been very receptive to my research. So that's very refreshing to see in the security world.
That is refreshing. I wouldn't have known whether or not to expect that from them, actually. You also presented some free tools to detect and protect against these kinds of things, so tell us about that.
Exactly. So part of my presentation, I designed some proof of concept malware for research purposes only.
Of course.
It was able to generically bypass all of Apple's security mitigations and also every third-party security tool that I tested, the antivirus tools, the firewalls. This worried me. So originally I wrote these tools selfishly, but then I figured sharing is caring, and so I should make them free. So I have a personal website, objectivec.com, that has free OS X security tools. No strings attached. I basically just want to share the tools I run on my computer to help me remain secure.
Great. So what is next? Now that you've done this for OS X, are you going to be looking at other operating systems?
Maybe. I've done a lot of work with Windows in the past, but the Microsoft guys have done a really good job, so it's actually a really hard target. So I think there's still a lot of new avenues on OS X, OS X that I still want to investigate. I think there's a lot of security issues still. And I think, as you mentioned, it's becoming more and more prevalent, so we're just going to see more attacks, nation states, maybe APT-based attacks.
Yeah.
So that really has my interest peaked, and I love malware, I love my Apple products, so I think I'm going to stay focused on that for a while, just because I think there's so much more research that can be done there.
Anything on iOS, you think?
iOS, Apple did a really good job there. It's so locked down. We do see jailbreaks, so I'm interested in those and looking at malware that maybe abuses the jailbreak. Some malware I talked about this morning actually was able to exploit jailbroken phones, or actually unjailbroken phones, if the user would agree to install an enterprise certificate. So any malware that infects iOS or OS X, anything Apple related, is really of a lot of interest to me.
I think it's of a lot of interest to a lot of people, actually. So
I agree.
Thank you
Definitely.
for what you've already been doing.
You're welcome.
I think all of us feel a little smug now when we hear that Apple has some problems. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it as well.
And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Black Hat experience, as I hope to when I am no longer here. Patrick Wardle, Director of Research at Synack.